The testing chamber reeked of failure and desperation, two scents that frankly I'd grown quite fond of over my 17 cycles as an instructor at the Galactic Military Academy. You see, I'm Vexthril, a Corthen evaluation officer, and my job is simple. Watch cadets attempt the impossible, document their spectacular failures, and occasionally, very occasionally, witness something that makes me question everything I thought I knew about physical limitations. Today was shaping up to be another ordinary day of disappointment. That is, until Cadet Renna Okonkwo walked into my testing bay with that peculiar human smile that somehow managed to be both disarming and vaguely threatening. The object in question sat in the center of the room like a monument to hubris, a solid block of compressed neutronium alloy, weighing in at precisely 4,200 kilograms. For context, that's roughly equivalent to a small transport shuttle. Except this particular block had been engineered specifically to test the upper limits of exoskeleton-enhanced strength. The current record, a Vraxian warbreed, had managed to shift it approximately 3 centimeters before his hydraulic assist suit literally exploded in a shower of lubricant and shame. I'd seen 47 cadets attempt this test in the past 2 standard months alone, and the best any of them had managed was making the block wobble slightly. And that was a Throck whose species evolved crushing rocks for nutrients. The human standing before me now, all 1.7 meters of her, looked like she'd struggled to lift a decent-sized datapad. Cadet Okonkwo, I drawled, my translator rendering my natural clicking into something approximating bored condescension. I assume you've reviewed the parameters of this evaluation. Yes, sir, she replied. And, oh, I loved this part. She wasn't wearing an exoskeleton. No hydraulic enhancements, no gravitational assist fields, no molecular reinforcement. Just standard-issue academy fatigues and a pair of what humans inexplicably call sneakers. I felt my anterior spiracles flutter in what you might call amusement. Cadet, the equipment lockers are marked quite clearly. Perhaps your species hasn't developed pattern recognition sufficient to— I won't be needing any equipment, sir. There it was again, that smile. I've learned that humans have approximately 43 distinct variations of smiling, and this particular one, what they call a shit-eating grin, usually precedes something either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. Regulations require— With respect, sir, regulations require that I move the weight. They don't specify how. She gestured toward the block with one hand while pulling her hair back with the other, gathering it into what I'd learned was called a ponytail. May I proceed? Protocol demanded I let her try, though I was already composing the incident report in my head. Human cadet sustains predictable injuries, attempting strength test without proper equipment. Possible psychological evaluation recommended for delusions of adequacy. I activated the recording systems. Proceed. What happened next? Well, let me walk you through it, because even now, after watching the footage approximately 317 times, I still can't quite believe it. Renna approached the block, circling it slowly. She wasn't rushing, wasn't psyching herself up with the war cries or meditation chants other species favor. She was just looking at it, the way a predator might study prey before the strike. And yes, I know humans are technically persistence predators, but until that moment, I'd never really understood what that meant. She crouched down, and here's where it got interesting. Her posture was all wrong for a standard lift. Every species we'd tested approached from the sides, trying to get leverage under the weight's center of gravity. Renna positioned herself at one corner, her hands finding purchase on edges that other cadets had ignored entirely. Then she did something that made absolutely no sense from a biomechanical standpoint. She exhaled. Slowly, completely, until I was certain she'd emptied her lungs entirely. In the silence that followed, I could hear the environmental processors humming, could hear the soft tick of the chronometer marking seconds, could hear my own circulatory system pulsing in my auditory organs. Interesting technique, I muttered, mostly to myself. Pass out from oxygen deprivation before attempting the impossible. Very efficient. But she didn't pass out. She inhaled one long, controlled breath that seemed to draw energy from the very air around her. Her muscles didn't bulge dramatically like a Vraxian's might. There was no visible transformation, no obvious preparation for extreme exertion. She simply set herself, like a piece of machinery clicking into optimal position. Then she lifted. I want to be very clear about what I saw, because my initial report was flagged as potentially corrupted data requiring independent verification. The block didn't shift, it didn't wobble or slide or reluctantly yield a few centimeters. It rose smoothly, steadily, inexorably off the testing platform. Renna stood up, the 4,000-kilogram weight cradled in her arms like it was a particularly large piece of luggage, and the sound that escaped my translator was something between a gasp and what I can only describe as a mechanical seizure. How? I managed, which wasn't exactly articulate, but in my defense, I was watching a human holding an object that should have required industrial lifting equipment. She turned to face me, and here's the part that still gives me what humans call the heebie-jeebies. She wasn't straining. Her breathing was elevated. Sure, and I could see sweat beginning to form on her forehead, but there was no grimace of pain, no trembling muscles on the verge of failure. She looked focused, certainly, but also weirdly calm. I can hold this for approximately 90 seconds before muscle fatigue becomes critical, she said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather rather than a complete violation of everything I understood about biology and physics. Would you like me to set it down, or should I demonstrate the carry requirement as well? The carry requirement. Right. Because simply lifting an impossible weight wasn't sufficient. The test also required transporting it across a 10-meter distance marked on the floor, a requirement that had been added purely as theoretical framework, because no one, and I mean no one, had ever actually lifted the damned thing in the first place. Words failed me. Actual words. In 3 languages. Carry. She nodded and began walking. Not shuffling, not staggering, but walking. Each step deliberate and controlled. Her feet found the floor with absolute precision, her posture adjusting microscopically with each movement to maintain balance. It was like watching a perfectly calibrated machine, except machines don't sweat, don't breathe, don't have that look of fierce concentration mixed with what I was beginning to recognize as barely suppressed satisfaction. She reached the 10-meter mark, turned around and walked back to the starting position, before setting the weight down with a control that was somehow more impressive than the lift itself. The block settled onto its platform with barely a sound. Then Renna straightened up, rolled her shoulders, actually rolled her shoulders, like this was some casual warm-up exercise, and looked at me expectantly. Test complete, sir. Time elapsed, 41 seconds. Would you like me to attempt the endurance variant? The endurance variant. The theoretical test that required holding the weight at chest height for a full minute. The test that existed only in the regulation manual, because it was physically impossible. No, I heard myself say. No, that won't be necessary. She nodded. And I noticed she was starting to breathe a bit heavier now, that the sweat was more pronounced. So she was human after all, not some kind of organic lifting construct disguised as a cadet. If I may ask, Cadet Okonkwo, I said, my voice somehow managing to sound almost steady despite my racing thoughts. How did you do that? And here came that smile again. But this time there was something gentler about it. Something almost educational. My people have a saying, sir. The weight doesn't know who's lifting it. That block? It's not trying to stay on the ground. Gravity is just doing what gravity does. The real question isn't whether I can overcome the force holding it down. It's whether I can convince my body that it's capable of something my brain thinks is impossible. I paused, trying to process this. That's not how physics works, isn't it though? She stretched her arms above her head, and I could hear several joints pop in a way that made my sensory organs retract involuntarily. Every species in this academy approaches that weight thinking about how heavy it is. They see 4,000 kilograms, and their nervous systems start preparing for failure before they even touch it. But weight is just information, sir. It's data. And data can be interpreted different ways. She started walking toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and sir, you might want to check with the testing equipment. Pretty sure I saw the platform sensors glitching when I set it down, Might need recalibration. After she left, I stood there for approximately 7 minutes. I know because the footage shows me just standing there, staring at the block like it had personally offended me. Which in a way it had. That weight had been my constant companion for cycles, my reliable proof that there were absolute limits to biological capability. Then I checked the platform sensors, because why not? My entire understanding of reality had already been thoroughly demolished. What was one more impossibility? The sensors weren't glitching. They were reading light. Specifically, they were reading the block as 400 kilograms lighter than its actual mass during the 23 seconds Renna had been holding it. 400 kilograms, roughly 10% of the total weight, had just vanished from the universe's accounting system, while in contact with a human's hands. I filed my report, flagged it as requiring immediate review, and then did something I hadn't done in 17 cycles of service. I requisitioned access to the Academy's restricted human studies database. What I found in those files kept me awake for 3 consecutive rest cycles, which is impressive considering my species can function quite well on minimal sleep. But understanding what humans are capable of, that requires full cognitive function and possibly some form of controlled substance to maintain sanity. Let me back up slightly because the story doesn't end with Renna casually violating the laws of physics. Oh no, that was merely the opening act. 2 days after the incident, I received a priority message from Commandant Xyloth himself, a Krivak whose idea of a good time involves reviewing tactical simulations and drinking what I'm told is the galactic equivalent of battery acid. The message was terse. Explain the Okonkwo anomaly. My office. Now. His office, for those fortunate enough to have never visited, is decorated in what I call aggressive minimalism, meaning everything is sharp, angular, and vaguely threatening. Xyloth sat behind his desk, his 4 eyes all focused on me with an intensity that suggested someone's career was about to take a sudden and unfortunate trajectory. Instructor Vexthral, he began, which was never a good sign. He usually called me by my chosen nickname, Vex. I've reviewed your report regarding Cadet Okonkwo 3 times, with independent verification. Sir, I can assure you, the readings are accurate, he interrupted, sliding a datapad across his desk. I've had the testing equipment inspected by 4 separate technical teams. The weight's mass didn't change. The gravitational constant in that section of the station remained stable, and yet the sensors recorded a measurable reduction in effective weight while the human was in contact with it. I took the pad, scrolling through analysis reports that confirmed what I'd already suspected. We had absolutely no idea what had happened. Sir, I've been researching human physiology, and I believe— You believe? Xyloth's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation or fascination with Krivak. It was often both simultaneously. Instructor, believing is for clerics and poets. I need data. Then, data you shall have, sir. I activated the pad's projection system, filling the air between us with holographic readouts of human biological scans. Humans have something called myostatin, a protein that limits muscle growth. Most species have similar regulatory mechanisms, yes. But here's where it gets interesting. Humans can consciously override these limitations. Consciously? Xyloth leaned forward. You're suggesting intentional biological regulation beyond autonomic function. More than that, sir. I'm suggesting that humans have evolved what they call hysterical strength, a state where conscious control can temporarily disable the body's safety protocols. There are documented cases throughout their history. Mothers lifting vehicles off trapped children, individuals breaking restraints that should have been physically impossible to break, soldiers performing feats that defy biomechanical modeling. I pulled up another file, this one showing Renna's biometric readings during the lift. Look at her neural activity here. These spikes in the motor cortex, the unusual patterns in the prefrontal regions. She wasn't just lifting with her muscles, sir, she was convincing her entire nervous system to rewrite its understanding of possible. Xyloth studied the data for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and the mass discrepancy. That, sir, I cannot explain with any known science. But I have a theory, one that sounds insane even to me, and I'm the one proposing it. Proceed. I took what humans call a deep breath, though my respiratory system works quite differently. What if human belief, what if human conviction can affect localized quantum probability fields? Not magic, not supernatural. Just consciousness interacting with matter at a level we don't fully understand yet. The mass didn't actually change, but perhaps the fundamental forces holding that mass together, the binding energy, the gravitational interaction. What if all of that can be influenced by a sufficiently focused mind? The silence that followed was profound and deeply uncomfortable. Then Xyloth did something I'd never seen him do in 15 cycles of service. He laughed. It was a horrible sound, like grinding metal against stone, but it was definitely laughter. You're suggesting, he managed between what I assumed were chuckles, that humans can essentially tell physics to kindly go screw itself, and occasionally physics complies. When you phrase it that way, sir, it does sound rather brilliant, he interrupted. Terrifying and brilliant. Do you know what this means? I had several ideas, none of them particularly comforting. Sir, it means we've been training humans wrong. He stood up, his full 2.3 meters of height making his office feel suddenly smaller. We've been teaching them our methods, our techniques, our understanding of limitation. We've been trying to fit them into frameworks designed for species that evolved under completely different selection pressures. He was right, of course. I'd seen it in training after training. Humans consistently underperformed when following standard protocols, but when left to develop their own approaches, their own unorthodox methods, they achieved results that made the rest of us look like we were operating at half capacity. I'm authorizing a new program, Xyloth continued, his tone shifting from contemplative to decisive. Human-specific training protocols. And you're going to design them. Me, sir, I'm hardly qualified to. You noticed what everyone else missed. You asked the right questions, and most importantly, he gestured toward the door with one primary appendage. You didn't immediately dismiss what you saw as impossible. You sought to understand it. That's exactly the mindset we need. 3 months later, I found myself standing in front of a class of 15 human cadets, including Renna, who sat in the front row with that eternally amused expression humans seem to wear when they know something you don't. Good morning, I began, feeling profoundly out of my depth. You've all been selected for this program because you demonstrated unconventional approaches to standard training. This course is designed to help you understand and develop capabilities that are, for lack of better terminology, uniquely human. A cadet named Dmitri raised his hand. Sir, are you saying we're special? I'm saying you're weird, I replied, which got the laugh I'd been hoping for. I'd learned that humans respond better to honesty than to polish. You're biologically strange, psychologically inexplicable, and apparently capable of making physics uncomfortable. My job is to help you figure out just how weird you can get. Over the following weeks, I watched these humans do things that should have remained firmly in the realm of theoretical speculation. Cadet Yuki demonstrated the ability to remain conscious and functional in G-forces that would have liquefied most species' internal organs. Cadet Jamal displayed reaction times that exceeded the theoretical limits of neural transmission speed. And Cadet Amara, sweet, quiet Amara, somehow managed to survive in a vacuum for 47 seconds without a suit before we pulled her back inside, and her only complaint was that her ears were kinda popping. But the real breakthrough came during a combat simulation against a Thruk strike team. The scenario was designed to be unwinnable. 6 humans against 12 Thruk warriors in close quarters combat. The expected outcome was tactical retreat and defensive positioning, maybe taking down 2 or 3 opponents if they got lucky. Renna's team eliminated all 12 Thruks in under 4 minutes. When I reviewed the footage, I saw something that made my translator actually shut down briefly from sheer confusion. The humans weren't just fighting, they were adapting in real time, learning from each exchange, modifying techniques mid-combat based on what worked and what didn't. They were processing information and implementing solutions faster than our tactical computers could model. One Thruk, Sergeant Krath, who I'd served with for 6 cycles and knew to be an exceptional warrior, cornered Dmitri against a bulkhead. The fight should have ended there. Krath had 50 kilograms of muscle mass advantage and decades more combat experience. Dmitri smiled at him, that same unsettling human smile, and said something that the audio pickups caught perfectly. "You're trying to kill me. I'm trying to learn. We are not the same." Then, he did something that Krath, in his official statement, described as physically inappropriate and cosmically unfair. Dmitri didn't try to overpower Krath. He used the Throk's own momentum, mass and expectations against him, redirecting, flowing, adapting. It was like watching water fight stone, except the water won. After the simulation, I found Renna in the observation deck, watching the stars through the viewport. "You knew this would happen," I said, not really asking. "Suspected," she corrected. "My species has been fighting each other for thousands of years, Vex. We've gotten pretty good at it, because we had to. We're not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest. We're just really, really stubborn, and we refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible until we've personally tried it at least 5 times. That's..." I searched for the right word. "Insane." "Probably," she agreed cheerfully. "But it works. You know what the difference is between us and everyone else in this academy? Aside from the casual disregard for biological limitations and the apparent ability to intimidate physics," she laughed. Actual laughter, the kind that's infectious even across species. "Everyone else here was born into civilizations that had already conquered their worlds. You grew up with technology, with established systems, with answers to most questions. We grew up in a universe that was actively trying to kill us, and we survived by being too stupid to realize we should have gone extinct. That's not stupidity," I found myself saying. "That's something else." "Yeah," she said softly, her reflection in the viewport showing that smile again. But this time it was different. Proud, fierce, and somehow tender all at once. "We call it hope, the really aggressive kind." 6 months after the program began, Commandant Zyloth called me back to his office. This time, there were 3 other individuals present: a Vraxian admiral, a Krivak overseer, and surprisingly, a human I'd never met before, wearing civilian clothes and an expression of polite interest. "Instructor Vexthrall," Zyloth began, "allow me to introduce Dr. Sarah Chen, Human Cultural Liaison to the Galactic Council." I didn't comment on the name being Sarah. Apparently, some names are just popular regardless of my personal restrictions, and instead focused on why a cultural liaison would be present at a military briefing. Dr. Chen smiled, not the aggressive human smile I'd grown accustomed to, but something warmer. "Instructor, I've been reviewing your reports on the human training program. Fascinating work. But I'm here because the Council has questions about the implications of your findings." "Implications, Doctor?" The Vraxian admiral spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Instructor, your research suggests that humans possess abilities that could be considered strategic assets. Possibly even weapons." There it was, the inevitable militarization of discovery. "With respect, Admiral," I said carefully, "I think you're missing the point. Yes, humans can do remarkable things, but that's not because they're weapons, it's because they're survivors. They evolved in an environment that rewarded impossible thinking, and that shaped their entire cognitive framework." "Semantics," the Admiral dismissed. "The question is, can these abilities be weaponized?" "The question," Dr. Chen interrupted gently, "is whether we should." The meeting devolved into the kind of high-level debate that makes me grateful I'm just an instructor. But the outcome was clear. Humanity had officially graduated from interesting curiosity to strategic consideration in the galactic community. Later, I found Renna and her team in the training bay, running exercises that looked more like choreographed chaos than military drills. "We're being studied now," I told them without preamble. "The Council wants to understand what you can do, how you do it, and whether it poses a threat to galactic stability." They stopped, exchanging looks that seemed to carry entire conversations. "Do they think we're dangerous?" Yuki asked. "I think they're realizing they don't know what you are," I replied honestly. "And the unknown is always dangerous." Renna walked over, placed one hand on my shoulder. A gesture I'd learned was meant to be comforting, though the implications of being touched by something that could casually violate physics remained unsettling. "Vex, do you think we're dangerous?" I considered the question carefully. These humans, who smiled before doing impossible things, who treated biological limitations like friendly suggestions, who somehow made the universe itself accommodate their stubbornness. Yes, I said finally, but not in the way the Council fears. You're dangerous because you make us question everything we think we know about what's possible. You're dangerous because you refuse to accept the world as it is, and instead insist it become what you believe it should be. You're dangerous because, I paused, finding the words, because you're infectious. You make the rest of us want to try lifting the weight we've always assumed was too heavy. Dimitri grinned. Sounds like you're becoming human, Vex. Terrifying thought, I muttered. But I was smiling too, or at least the Corthan equivalent. As I watched them return to their training, moving through impossible exercises with that peculiar human confidence, I realized something profound. We hadn't been teaching humans how to be warriors. We'd been learning how to be more. And that weight I'd watched Renna lift all those months ago, it was still sitting in my testing bay, waiting for the next cadet who'd look at 4,000 kilograms and think, sure, why not? Turns out the real test was never about moving the weight. It was about moving our understanding of what weight even means when a human decides it's negotiable. I filed my final report that night, concluding with a statement that would probably define my career. Humans don't break the rules of physics, they simply haven't agreed to them yet. Recommend extreme caution, maximum respect, and possibly good insurance. The next morning, I received notification that Renna and her team had been cleared for advanced operations. They'd be the first fully human unit deployed for actual missions beyond academy training. I wasn't worried though, well, not much anyway. After all, I'd seen a 1.7-meter human hold 4,000 kilograms like it was a particularly insistent suggestion rather than an absolute law. If the universe had a problem with that, it could take it up with them directly. Personally, my money was on the humans.